Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. I welcome those who are here and those online attending our event today. It's about the Olympics. We have a group of intellectuals and former diplomats opposing the holding of Tokyo Olympics. While some people say it's too late already, it's imminent Olympics. And it reach the point of no return. We will have it next in the coming few days. And it seems like Prime Minister Suga and his ally now, Mr. Bach, he's a chairman of IOC. They burned their ships and they are just going on course to the Olympic Village and the Olympic Stadium. And everything is all set. But a group of people who opposed this Olympics, up to 600,000 people signed against that, and maybe other websites. This is according to our guest. They said they have a big group of those who oppose the Olympics. They will tell us why in this press conference. Before we start, let me introduce our guest speakers today. We will start with Mr. Yutaka Iimura. He's visiting professor, National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies, also senior fellow at GRIPS Alliance, and former ambassador of Japan to France. And secondly, we have Ms. Chizuko Ueno. She's chief director, certified NPO Women's Action Network, sociologist, and professor emeritus and at the University of Tokyo. Not socialist, sorry. And thirdly, we have our colleague at the press club, the journalist, Mr. Mikio Haruna. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest speakers today. And we start. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Let me start, probably introduce ourselves. Actually, we are the group of artists and intellectuals. And although I'm not an artist or either artist or intellectual, I'm just simple form. Now, early July, just 3-4 weeks ago, and everybody has the same concern. Why do we have to accept this Olympic Games, which was and which is supposed to take place in several days' time in this difficult time of not only Japan but also entire world. COVID-19 is raging, and it's very dangerous to hold these games. So we decided to, through Change.org, ask everybody who agrees with us to sign, and ask the government and Olympic organizers to stop doing this. That was the beginning, and in just over 2 weeks' time, our group has gathered about 140,000 signatures. And in addition to the Mr. Utsunomiya's group, which started his activities in May, and he has more than 400,000 signatures. And as Mr. President mentioned, probably all in all, the number of those who signed for asking the government to cancel this Olympic Games goes up to 600,000, which is an enormous number, actually. We are based upon those support coming from our Japanese public, not only Japanese, but also the people from all over the world, because we circulated our petition in English, in German, in French, and in Spanish, in addition to Japanese, so 5 languages. We wanted this movement in international. So, and just one thing which I want to add to what I said is politically we are not, we don't belong to any political movement or political parties. We have diversity of political views from radical left to a moderate conservative. Professor Ueno may belong to radical left. No, I'm sorry. This is my prejudice, probably. And she will say what she believes politically, but this is not political movement. This is really, we want to represent the feeling of Japanese public people against the Olympic Games, which is going to take place. Why now? Is it too late? Well, certainly it may be too late, but as often is said, nothing is never too late. I think we will continue to advocate for cancellation of Olympic Games. 1 year ago, when the Prime Minister Abe, when he postponed by 1 year the Olympic Games, I think the government was optimistic, and government thought that these Tokyo Olympic Games and Paralympic Games could take place in much better conditions, but they failed to predict what could happen. The conditions surrounding the Olympic and Paralympic Games have been deteriorating. On the one hand, the currently number of infected people with COVID-19 is rapidly increasing. Vaccination is incredibly low, very low proportion of public is vaccinated, which is, as Mr. Omi, who is advisor to the Prime Minister, said, usually it does not happen under this condition. I mean, Olympic Games cannot happen under this condition. I think he said so some time ago. And what is called bubble method, which aims separate the athlete and Olympic official, international Olympic officials coming from abroad, and Japanese public, and also those who are living in Japan, separate, and so that the COVID-19 cannot spread. But I think as far as we have seen, it has failed, and it will fail. Do you remember that Prime Minister Suga said that the Olympic Games will take place in safe and secure manner? He even committed himself in for example, on the occasion of G7 summit. If you remember, he said, the summit communique said that we, meaning G7 heads of government and state, reiterate our support for the holding of Olympics and Paralympics Games in Tokyo in a safe and secure manner as a symbol of global unity in overcoming COVID-19. That is exactly what the summit communique said. But in two ways, we are not seeing that this is becoming a reality. Safe and secure, will it happen? And is it a symbol of global unity in overcoming COVID-19? I don't think so. So we'll see. We are not convinced by the government that the promise that Prime Minister made is actually being realized. This is the second point. And third point is as you are stationing and living in Japan, you may notice that there are two kinds of feeling among Japanese public. On the one hand, there is a strong anxiety, rapid and low vaccination rate, and some among others. And this anxiety, I think, is now turning into anger against what the government is doing. And as Washington Post of yesterday said, probably hostility to Japanese authorities and Olympic organizers. And if you take a public opinion poll, according to Asahi Shimbun public opinion poll, about 60% of Japanese public is opposed to the holdings of Olympic Games. So, in fact, the Olympic Games taking place against this strong opposition on the part of public, not only Japanese, but also international public opinion. And I think we should continue to advocate for cancellation of the Olympic Games toward the end, so to show to the history that we are not compromising ourselves. We are not accepting the government policy. And this picture should remain in the history of Japan. This Tokyo Olympic Games takes place against public opinion. And this probably is the first time in the history of Olympic Games that games take place in such a condition. So finally, I want to point out as I stationed twice in developing countries in Southeast Asia, Philippines and Indonesia, and I exchange emails with my friends in Indonesia, and they are really in disparate conditions. Every day you have new infection. Every day you have more than 40,000 people infected with COVID-19. And because of lack of hospitals, medical equipment, they are really suffering. And this is not only, as you know, this is not only country which suffers in such a manner from this pandemic. There are already Brazil, India, now Indonesia newly member of these suffering countries, and also Malaysia, many others. And this is not the time we hold Japan as a peace-loving nation, hold the Olympic Games. I think we should concentrate ourselves on the measures to be taken place here in Japan to prevent spreading of COVID-19, and also extending our hands to those developing nations which are suffering. And I think that is what my friends and our friends in developing countries are expecting us to do. And of course, they talked about, at the G7 summit, talked about how to help developing world to overcome this pandemic. But of course, it's not sufficient, and we need to spend more and work more for those people living in the developing countries, rather than spending our money and our energy on the Olympic Games. Thank you very much.
Okay. I'm a radical feminist, but not the radical left. Don't misunderstand me. You may be surprised to see this unlikely alliance between an ex-diplomat, Mr. Iimura, and a notorious feminist scholar and activist, Ueno Chizuko, myself. Believe it or not, we had never met before we started this campaign. Diplomats are those who would not resist the order from their home country. And it's clear that Mr. Iimura can feel free to say whatever he wanted to say only after his retirement. Yes. Is that correct? Yes. I was deeply impressed and moved. Even such a person like him wished to make a protest out of the sense of urgency, which made me to decide to join him. As you know, we are at the state of emergency with this COVID-19 pandemic. Put the first priority on coping with the pandemic by mobilizing all the resources. On the other hand, the Olympic Games are the festival of peace. The objective conditions which allow to hold this festival has greatly changed from the time when the ex-Prime Minister Abe 1 year ahead. We now face unpredicted risk of the new corona variants, and the vaccination of the Japanese people are much delayed than planned. Only 20% of the entire population get vaccinated. I myself, belonging to the aged, Mr. Abe was convinced that Japan could produce homemade vaccine. Fantasy with any scientific evidence on other countries, meaning our government is incapable to guarantee the national health security. Many scientists and medical doctors have made a warning to stop the Olympic Games, but the politicians would not listen to their voices. With these conditions, it's insane, absurd, ridiculous to hold these games. We are now suffering from our poor political leadership. Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games are the worst country. According to the opinion polls, more than 50%, he says 60%, of people important citizens do. There are several online campaign sites against the Tokyo Olympic Games. Our site has collected nearly 140,000 signatures. Other site, started earlier by lawyer Utsunomiya Kenji, has reached 455,000. Another one, to show how to cancel the games, has gathered so far 63,000 until last night. To put them together, more than 600,000 people have joined us to protest against the games. This is not a small number. Mr. Abe called people against the Olympic Games as anti-Japanese, which should be simply translated as anti-Abe. If they are anti-Japanese, he has to admit more than half of the nation are anti-Japanese. Our government have asked people to endure inconvenience. Many women have lost their jobs. Restaurant owners and chefs and the service workers are squeezed at the corner. Doctors and nurses made us scream not to spread the infection, while children are required not to make the school athletic games. Why is such a large-scale sports event is an exception? While people are urged not to dine out with more than 2 persons, the Tokyo 2020 Organizing Committee organized a welcome reception for President of IOC, Mr. Thomas Bach, last night. Originally planned inviting 500 people ended up with 40, but recently 15 bureaucrats had a dinner party causing infection cluster. When everyone is required to be patient, why not athletes? There is a growing hostility against sports games and players with a suspicion if they are so privileged and exceptional. We see a rise of negative sentiment against the Olympic Games themselves, which reminds people of the previous scandals one after another in the process of preparations. It's now proven that the Olympic Games are the decoy of commercialism and nationalism. All the factors have reminded us of the painful memory of our past, when the Japanese government stepped into the reckless war, which was determined to end up with a defeat. I belong to the student power generation who accused our parents for their responsibility why they could not stop the war. Now, aged, I am in the position to be accused by the younger generation, asking why do not stop these ridiculous games. As a post-war generation, we are no longer the Japanese imperial subject. And fortunately, to say no to the authority does not bring us death nor torture, unlike in Hong Kong nor in Myanmar. Living in the democratic country, we exercise our right to say no until the last moment, even during the games. We receive criticism saying it would be too late to cancel the Olympic Games, but we think it's our duty to record our opposition in history, and our protest has offered an opportunity to make a bunch of people visible who share our opinion. Using the term war is not simply a metaphor. War accompanies victims. Once the game invites any death of athletes, supporters, service workers, medical professionals, policemen, and volunteers. Who will take a responsibility and how? In addition, the Japanese nation will be indebted with a tremendous cost left by the games. Who will pay the cost? Now, as you know, the 5th wave of the pandemic is starting. Tokyo may become a serious epicenter, causing a super spread of the new unknown variant, which may be called the Olympic variant. The worst scenario would be a disruption after it starts due to the serious spread of infection. I'm sure such a situation will destroy the trust and the confidence of Japan and its nation, which will be fatal to the future of our society. I sincerely hope you, the international journalists, will share our concern out of this sense of urgency and make a report to tell the truth to the international committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Haruna-san, from Mikio.
Thank you so much. I think everyone here may agree that only science can prevent infections, but neither the Japanese government and the International Olympic Committee, IOC, have not done good preparations for the Olympic Games by reviewing scientifically every possibility. We have not seen infections experts in the Tokyo 2020 organizing committee or IOC. This Tokyo 2020 is originally politically motivated from the bidding stage, and only 1 year postponement was not well reviewed by the scientists. It was decided last year by former Prime Minister Abe only by himself. Since then, almost every policy by the government, such as infection prevention, vaccine procurement, etc., has been wrong. We may see the worst case scenario during the games, in which many infections are found in the bubble, so-called bubble, and many game schedules will be canceled. This can happen, actually. The worst case is a kind of disaster for everyone, including athletes, government, IOC, and people of Japan. Then Prime Minister Suga and the government party will not be able to benefit from Tokyo 2020. It is not too late. Why not cancel it right now? Actually, the IOC has also big troubles already. You may not recognize troubles involving IOC. IOC, particularly under President Thomas Bach, has faced many serious troubles. Number one is the doping issue. If there is no pandemic, I think the people pay much more strong attention to doping. Actually, in 2016, serious doping programs organized by Russian government and its intelligence agency were revealed. At that time, World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA, recommended IOC to impose blanket ban on Russian athletes. But President Bach refused to follow the recommendation and allowed Russian athletes participate not under Russian national flag, but Olympic flag. Mr. Bach did not explain the reason. Number two, management style of Mr. Bach. Many strange decisions have been done by Mr. Bach, such as deciding 2 Olympic game cities, 2024 for Paris and 2028 for Los Angeles, at all once, and the executive committee agreement without competition on 2032 for Brisbane, Australia. IOC is a non-profit, non-government organization which is subject to audit by the government of Switzerland only. It is a private entity at all. But now it earns a lot of money, too much money, by contracts with NBC and other broadcasting for. The organization is easily controlled by a president, dominant type of person like Mr. Park. I think IOC must be reformed for better organization, subject to democracy and humanity. Otherwise, we will see many more troubles within the IOC organization. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentations. We'd like to open the floor to Q&A. If you have any question, please raise your hand and proceed to the front mic. Richard? State your name and affiliation.
よろしくお願いします。インドネシアのメディア、テレビニュースの、スシローリチャルと申します。井村大使の方に、本当に尊敬しますので、なぜというか、その前、在インドネシア日本大使の時が、ものすごい素晴らしい大使だと思います。で、今は反対活動やってるので、ちょっとびっくりした。本当にびっくりした。なぜというか、反対活動より、今もあと8日間ですから、金曜日、外交式やってますので、この4日間が反対活動より、選手の人たちに応援した方がいいじゃないかなと思います。で、なぜというか、みんなってアスリートの人たちですね、この最後の2年間、ものすごい頑張ってますので、練習とか準備全部。で、反対したより、みんな応援した方がいいかなと思います、100%。だから、反対活動の人たちが、これ私のお願いなんですけども、ファイトっていいんですけども、どれもいいですけどもね。で、アスリートの方に気持ち考えた方がいいんじゃないかなと思いますですけども、飯村大使、このアスリートの気持ちが考えてるでしょうか。よろしくお願いいたします。
Please translate.
Mr. Iimura, I respect you as a former ambassador of Japan to Indonesia, so I am very surprised that you are actually opposing this event now. What about athletes? They have been practicing over the last 2 years very hard, and it's only 4 days before the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games. Wouldn't you be supporting the athletes instead of protesting the games itself? My request is to please think of athletes. What do you think, please?
Well, thank you very much for your difficult questions. Actually, for me, it was very difficult decision to make. When I think about athletes who have been training for many, many years and sacrificing themselves for the Olympic Games, and also when I think about what could happen if we hold the games as planned starting next week. So there are two ambivalent feelings inside me, and yes, with due respect to the athletes who have been training very hard. But nevertheless, I felt obliged to speak up against Olympic Games because this involves not only entire nation of Japan, but also entire world. We are facing to the pandemic, worldwide pandemic. And if we cannot control the pandemic, I think we will be seeing lots of more sacrifice, health in terms of health and lives, and we are seeing now what can happen if we are not careful enough. What can happen in Indonesia? You are increasing number of people infected with COVID-19. I'm not naturally blaming the government of Indonesia and other countries in Southeast Asia. But if we are not careful, and if we accept the Olympic Games in Tokyo as super spread event, then we will see more people, more countries affected by this pandemic. So this is a difficult decision. Which side do you take? Athletes who have been training, or the controlling pandemic? And I sincerely believe that for the sake of humanity, I think we should put priority on fighting against COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
May I add one thing? To me, it seemed that the athletes are also victims. They are sent to Japan, which is actually a very dangerous zone for everyone. And so their country, forced to send them to this dangerous zone. And also, they have to refrain from going out and shopping and tourism and everything. And also, under this pandemic, we all the nations and the guests and everyone are suffering from this pandemic. Why are the athletes exceptional? And so we endured this inconvenience and painful experience and conditions. So in this sense, it is also the duty of athletes. They cannot be exceptions. So their duty to share inconvenience and hate and this situation.
Thank you. I received a question online from Anthony Rowley.
Mr. President,
Please go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was wearing sunglasses without noticing, and my wife sitting over there sent me email to put off eyeglasses. I'm very sorry about this inconvenience that might have caused to you.
All right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Anthony Rowley is SCMP. He asked, what is the panel's estimate of cancellation costs at this point? How much canceling the Olympics will cost Japan? That is already acquired a lot of losses financially.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I think this is too difficult to answer, as we are not expert on the side of economic side of the Olympic Games. There's one group of experts who has been working on the economic side of particularly how much it would cost if we cancel, and how much do we have to pay to the companies and to sponsors, etc. They have been working hard to figure out how much it would cost if we cancel, but we are not expert on this side.
Thank you. Anybody wants to ask? Yes? Please. You can lift it.
Thank you very much. My name is Yusuke Wada, associate member here. Just for the record, exactly 2 years ago, I was trying to organize a press conference with Ms. Ueno Chizuko here about Oirase Summit. And the FCCJ was very hesitant due to Olympics being held back then. And this year we have this facility closed from Thursday. There's nothing we can do about it. And my question is, since you have such a vast majority of political supporters from far left to far right about the opposition of Olympics, with this such a diversity, if we were to have a general elections of Shugin, which party do you think will win?
Maybe Haruna-san, maybe you expert on this.
No, at this moment, nobody knows, but I think the government parties, including LDP and Komeito, will lose many more seats, more than expected.
Do you think which party will win, or instead of we'll probably know which will lose?
I think
No one can predict.
All right. Any more questions? Yes, please. Mari?
Mary Corbett, Cressner Media. I'm writing for several outlets during the Olympics. So I have a question to all three of you, if you have an opinion. So if we have an outbreak, because already we've tested, I think, 3-4 separate groups of athletes arriving plus staff. And of course, from the first day, we made mistakes from Narita, as I think you all know. So what will be the position of the government and Tokyo, and of course the IOC, if there is an outbreak and certain events must be canceled immediately? What position? This is hypothetical. What position will they must have some sort of scenario prepared, because there are already so many positive cases. Do you think?
I think it's a kind of a worst case scenario. I think the organizing committee nor government of Japan have not prepared for worst case. So I think there'll be a kind of explosion if outbreak happens.
Just to follow up on that, so do you know this impenetrable bubble that they kept talking about? Even in a simulation, you could see holes all over. At Narita, for example, a week ago. And then this time, athletes, staff, and journalists are arriving. They're supposed to be self-quarantined for 3 days. There are no checks. Many of them went out on the first night. Right. There was nobody stopping them in the lobby to go out or come back. So we know that actually none of these protections seem to be in place. Wouldn't that cause alarm even amongst the organizers? I'll stop there. I have so many questions, but thank you.
But actually, it is a serious concern about who is responsible for what. So far, all the decisions were made based on the 5者協議って何て言うんですか? I mean, 5 stakeholders. I mean, organizing committee and IOC, JOC, and the Japanese government and Tokyo Metropolitan government. But that means no one would take any responsibility. This kind of uncertainty of the responsibility made us quite concerned.
Yes, any question? Okay, let me fill the gap. I ask question. We still have 10 minutes to go. I felt that you are blaming former Prime Minister Mr. Abe for the whole thing, and you said he's behind the Olympics, Japan hosting the Olympics, and he's behind the postpone, and he's behind 1 year, and it's like I felt you are talking about kind of North Korean leader, but Japan is a democracy, and I don't think a leader can take a decision that easy in Japan, and I think you have also a lot of business prepared for the Olympics, and there are many opinions that the Olympics was very good for Japan, especially after the Fukushima crisis. Also, the construction sector was complaining about that because there were not enough construction companies to rebuild Fukushima. Anyway, it seems that the reason is beyond the human capabilities. Like, it's a virus and nobody knows. Even the big superpowers are suffering. So why do you blame one person only about the whole thing? And do you have any proof that if you don't hold the Olympics, Corona will be defeated, or you will be better off without the Olympics? Thank you. I'm just taking the devil's seat here.
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. I'm not. I don't think I'm blaming only one person. If I may have given that impression when I talked, I think it's not correct impression that you got from my statement. I think the Olympic Games takes place as a result of combination between number one, political benefit, number two, economic benefit, number three, the national sentiment, nationalism. Many elements combined into the decision which was made to hold Olympic Games in 2020. But I do remember, I'm behaving like Mr. Suga. He always talks about the Olympic Games '64. I was a high school student at that time when the Olympic Games was took place in Tokyo. There was really high emotion, the positive sentiment prevailing among the public. But this time, when this is my impression, but when there was a decision on the part of International Olympic Committee that Tokyo would be the place where the next Olympic Games would take place, I don't think there was any positive response. At best, there was indifference, and as far as I'm talking to my friends and my families, not feeling his interest, and some sector of Japanese society which thinks that we could promote the nationalism through this Olympic Games, which was very wrong. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm not blaming personally Mr. Abe. Mr. Abe took a wrong decision when he postponed the game by 1 year. 1 year was probably not enough, and he should have listened to scientists and professionals on the COVID-19, whether the 1 year was enough to overcome this pandemic.
Thank you very much. We still have about 8 minutes for questions. All right. Let me ask Haruna-san.
Yeah.
You talked about the IOC president, Mr. Bach, or Bach. He's kind of dominator or dictator. I'm not sure. And there are some reports that the IOC is kind of full of corruption or something like that. I don't know. I read that. Do you have any reason to believe that the pandemic is good news for the IOC to cover up?
Good news?
I mean, do you have evidence to say? I mean, good news by for them, the pandemic helped them to cover up. Basically, do you have any serious evidence about that? Thank you.
Yeah, I do not know, how to answer your question. Probably.
Because IOC is responsible for canceling, not Japan. I heard, right?
Right.
technically.
But they need actually money also at this time. They have a contract with NBC valued or about $1 billion for one Olympic Games. And so they may lose that amount of money if this Tokyo 2020 is cancelled.
Mary, I feel you have, yeah, please.
Can you ask her to put off mask?
Yes,
Possible?
okay.
Because
Yes,
I cannot hear.
すいません、NHK の松田と申します。よろしくお願いします。世界では、インドネシアだったりの国のように、感染拡大しているところもあれば、欧米ではワクチンがかなり進んでいってっていうところもあって。
ちょっとすいません。私耳がちょっと。
聞きがすいません。
マスクをちょっと外して
いいですか。すいません。インドネシアのように今感染がかなり拡大している国もあれば、欧米のようにかなりワクチンが進んで日常生活が戻ってきつつあるところもあって、日本の状況っていうのが海外の人たちにとって日本がどういう状況なのかっていうのが分かりにくい、あとメディアの方も来られて14日間はどこにも出られませんので、日本の状況を伝えることもできないっていうのが、日本の状況が知られてないというような状況があるとも思ってます。そういう中で今お三方ここで、外国特派員協会で、会見を開かれている海外に対してなぜ訴えているのか、どういったことを伝えたいのかというところを教えていただけますでしょうか。
May I ask you, what kind of message are you going to convey to the international community by having this conference at FCCJ? My question comes from the fact that in EU and North America, vaccination coverage is wide and the people are becoming to have the normal life back. How, in that context, they would not know what's happening exactly in Japan because journalists in Japan have 14 days quarantine. They cannot really tell what's happening in Japan out to the outside world. So that is the context of my question. What exactly would you like to tell the international community?
We are now under the unpredicted condition in all over the world, and the Olympic Games is the international games. This should not be only a national concern, but an international concern. That's what we do.
Can I also answer to Matsuda-san's question? I think there are 2 points. Number one, this Olympic Games takes place in a very dangerous situation in terms of the pandemic and COVID-19. That is the first point. And second point is the government, knowing or not knowing, I don't know. The government go ahead with the original plan of holding the games despite the majority of Japanese public, 60 to 70% of Japanese public opinion is this idea holding the Olympic Games. And we want to show to the outside world through the helping hands on the part of foreign correspondents and also Japanese media that Japanese entire nation is supporting what the government is doing. We are concerned about what the government is doing. This is already, I think, reported in variety of foreign newspapers. For example, Forbes, Washington Post, recently they wrote articles regarding Japanese situation and situation in Japan, and the government goes against public opinion. But I think if you may ask me the question, those are 2 messages that we want to convey to the world.
Yeah, Mari-san, I think I was told by a person who is knowledgeable about inside the government. They have a kind of a precondition that there will be no infection within the bubble. That is their precondition. I think that's not science at all. Right.
Only 1 minute because they have to leave, but please, very quick question. Yes, 1 minute, please.
今日はありがとうございました。
Your name,
開催都市契約、
お名前
アソシエイトメンバーの佐藤と申します。佐藤 is my name, アソシエイトメンバー。開催都市契約によると、結局このオリンピックを中止できるのは IOC だけだと言われてますが、皆さんこうやってなんかお話を伺ってると、こういう運動をしたっていうことが歴史に残るんだっていうことで、実はもったいないなと思ってるんですね。で、誰がこの開催を中止できるか、開催をすることをやめる決断をして IOC に申し入れるか、これが大事だと思うんですけども、思い切ってこのやめるっていうことを言える人がいたらですね、結局IOC がこの後で訴えてもですね、IOC は先ほど皆さんおっしゃってましたけれども、結局国家ではありませんから、それでもって多分法廷に出て戦った場合に中止は認められると思うんですね。結局誰がその中止を申し入れるかというところで、皆さんの動きがですね、そこまで多分動かさないと思われるんで、ちょっと頑張っていただきたいなと思ってるんですけども、いかがでしょうか。
Sato from Associate. I hope your movement will be successful because it's such a great one. It's not to be left in the history, but it should say something now. According to the contract, it says that it is the IOC that can cancel the games. However, I do think that if someone takes the responsibility to say this is going to be canceled to the IOC, and since IOC is not a state entity, it cannot win at the court room if this is become a lawsuit. So the cancellation will be accepted. So what do you think of that view?
Thank you.
I'm not a lawyer, and I probably can not give you a legal answer to your questions. But as United Nations Secretary General mentioned at the General Assembly of WHO about a month ago, he said the world is at war against the pandemic. This is a very important statement on the part of United Nations Secretary General. We are at war with the pandemic. So this is not normal situation. This is abnormal situation. And whether the contract that City of Tokyo concluded with International Olympic Committees can stand in the emergency situation. Probably this is something that we can have a legal dispute. But I'm sorry, again, I'm not a legal expert. But that is eventually, if Japanese government and the Tokyo Metropolitan Office and the International Japanese Organizing Committee decides to cancel, probably this is one of the points to be discussed among them.
Thank you very much. This wraps up our event today. I appreciate very much your coming here And I learned from you that you are going now to Tokyo government to meet the deputy governor to give him the letter of opposition again. So you have a long day to work. And meanwhile, we hope that no harm happens in the Olympics, or regardless of its continue or not. And that's it for today. Thank you, everybody, for watching this online and for coming here. And I wish you a very nice afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much.
And special thanks for our interpreter.
ありがとうございました。どうもすいません。
Thanks all.
あ、どうも。電話でしかまだお話ししたいんで、またよろしくお願いします。ずっとフォローしてます。これ